do we make early warning systems more scalable, sustainable, and effective for everyone? Because when we talk about scalable, sustainable, and effectiveness, that comes through the full potential of public and private partnership. And we know that there is a huge scope if we have timely, robust early warning systems that can save life, but also how to make sure that this partnership becomes even more critical, working between the government, private sector, innovators like tech providers, research organizations, civil societies. And we all have shared outcomes of saving lives, protecting livelihood, improving the overall security when it comes to the climate impact. So what we are going to see today in terms of the discussion coming from a wide range of experts from technical institutions like Deltares, community-driven organizations like AIDMI, climate finance leaders, and importantly, the macro understanding of the cruise initiative Dr. John will be speaking on, and also the technology innovators like Intersect. So I believe we have a very fascinating session. You are going to see the experiences they are going to share when it comes to bridging the technology policies and impact. And thank you all for the participant for being part of this important dialogue. Let's work together in terms of turning early warning into a technical service for sustainable public goods. And with that, let me now introduce Dr. John. John Harding is the director acting in charge for climate risk and early warning system, briefly called as CRUISE Secretariat at WMO. He leads the head of this program at the WMO, as I said. Prior to joining, he worked in the United Nations for 18 years, serving as a political advisor to the United Special Envoy to Haiti, President William Jefferson, head of UNDP Disaster Risk Reduction, and advisor to the UN Resident Coordinator in Pakistan. I would not go more detail about that. I believe you will be learning a lot more from cruise initiatives. With that, let me invite John to share his experiences from cruise perspective. I hope you can hear me now and you could share the screen. John, you can hear us?
Yes, thank you,
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you.
Maranath. I can hear you well. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. You have a presentation you want us to share.
Yes, please.
Niranga, could you share the screen?
I'm share screen.
We are not able to see the slide. Yeah. Over to you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to CAGR and to the International Water Management Institute for organizing this webinar. So I think today's subject is topical. As you just mentioned, we have this strong commitment to ensuring that all people are covered by early warning systems. And it's reflected in the early warning rule, it's reflected in the Sendai framework. And we also collectively recognize that in order to achieve this, the private sector is going to need to play an important role. And so I hope you understood, I manage a dedicated financing mechanism. So we're looking at helping to bridge the early warning capacity gap in LECs and SIDS. And in that function, I'm often invited to discussions, typically on financing, early warning. And in those discussions, systematically, the role of the private sector is mentioned as part of the solutions. It's rhetorically, it always comes up in all these events. However, the reality is actually quite different. And actually, if we look across our portfolio of programs and projects, we see little penetration of the private sector, in our programs, and the really good practices. We don't have that many good practices on which to build. And so, I think today's discussion will be very useful in hearing also from the panelists about their experiences in this space. So basically, I'll provide a little bit of the context, the role of the private sector, and look at maybe some pointers really on how we can better engage the private sector. And I'd like to stress upfront, I really don't have all the answers in this space. And but as I mentioned, we had a very knowledgeable panel, and I'm certain they'll be able to answer a lot of the other questions that you may have on this topic. So if I can have the next slide, please. No, this is right. Yeah, the challenge, that's fine. So the context, early warning is a public service. It is the responsibility of national and local authorities. It contributes to national security, and as a public service, it's predominantly needs to be financed by national budgets. And of course, this, obviously, when it comes to making life-saving decisions, issuing messages, it's crucial that we have an authoritative voice in this space and all these related operational procedures. And at the same time that we recognize this is a responsibility for national institutions, the public budgets are shrinking in most countries. And we know the upstream costs of managing the infrastructure for early warning systems is high. We need to put in place the observation networks. We need to run the numerical weather prediction models. We need the tools, the systems, the service to overlay the predictions with risk information. We need to be able to issue warnings, communicate those warnings, work with the communities to ensure that all these products are understood and acted upon. So it's not an easy task, and it also has quite a considerable costs, and particularly when it comes to maintaining these systems, putting in place the systems, a certain cost, but then you also need the cost of maintaining it. So, of course, if it's possible to run some of these services that are developed on a commercial basis, this is obviously seen as a very useful way of reducing the burden on the public finances. The problem we have, of course, is that the countries that are most exposed to these extreme events, the least developed countries, the small and developing states, are also the ones with limited institutional capacities. And it's also the same countries that have an overall lower, private sector penetration in their models. And if you look across the countries where we're working in, say it's essentially these are countries and small island states, the type of private sector engagement in the space, the private sector is mostly composed of micro, small enterprises, often informal. And in some of the countries, this can compose up to 90% of the businesses that work in this space. And we know the reasons why we have such a low private sector penetration. We have in those countries, they have underdeveloped financial systems, high interest rates, limited access to capital. If you look in SIDS, the private sector is predominantly, or the tourism sector is really predominant, and that often crowds out any kind of diversification of the private sector. So in a way, to be able in these countries to be able to talk about private sector playing a more important role in early warning systems, we also need to improve the wider, we could call it business climate for these countries. So if I can have my next slide, please. So the potential for private sector engagement, I think we'll all recognize it is high, but also very diverse. So if you'll recognize here the four pillars of an effective early warning system, and in each of one of these pillars, the private sector can play a role, and the role would be played by different types of companies and businesses. If we look across in some of the countries where we work, we have been able to develop some good partnerships. As I say, it's not as much as we would like, but we do have some good examples. Here I'm mentioning the case of in Tonga, where we work with a private company to develop a smart weather app for the country, which allows the whole population to access weather and climate information, but also warnings and to feed back into the system. So these are good practices where the private sector can play an important role. But we also have examples of countries we work with cell phone companies in order to be able to issue common alerting protocols. Some countries are working with Google who help provide the national meteorological organizations with cloud systems in which they can help to store all the climate and weather data, which is a much cheaper way and actually safer way than having it in data banks, which is currently the way in which data is stored. So there's lots of examples, and types of engagements in which the private sector can play a role. And I think if you have to recognize that if there is a policy space, there is a potential for working with the private sector. And if I can have my next slide, please. And this is my last slide. And there's actually quite a range of scenarios, or let's call it levels of maturity of a national system to really allow private sector actors to play a role in this space. So it ranges from we have very limited penetration of the private sector, and all the way through to countries where they're able to really optimize the type of the commercialization of some of the services, often by providing the data open access, free access to data. And then our commercial companies can come in and produce certain sector-specific products which are more suited to certain audiences and help to push for innovation. So in those kind of countries, we see a very it's often very beneficial if they have these systems in place. So I think my main message today is that if in countries where we do have robust institutions, and these what I mean by robust institutions is institutions that are built on also robust legislations that clearly defines the role of the public institutions, defines the service and modalities to engage the private sector. That's the space where it's really possible to maximize the benefit of the private sector and all the innovation that comes with the competition and so on. So no, in cruise, we continue to try and support the countries where we're working to develop these more robust institutional settings and legislative frameworks. We actually have a policy now, which our board asked us to ensure that we have private sector engagement in every one of our financing decisions. We've developed related operational procedures. So yeah, we're very aware of that the first step for private sector engagement is to develop these policies and systems and services in place. And one of our priorities will be to continue learning, sharing experience, the experiences that we are developing, but we're very keen on learning and sharing and hearing experiences from others. And that's why we're very happy to be part of these discussions here today. I think there's a lot more potential in this space, and we're going to have to get a lot better at it if we're going to be in effect really reaching early warning for all in a short time span. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to listening to the panelists' inputs. I will have to leave at 2:30, but thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John, for this insightful scenarios that you presented on the private sector engagement. I'm glad to see there are certain procedures have come out from the Secretariat how to bring the role of private sector. Often the case of at a country level, we always see the role of blending the public and private sector is not so easy. Particularly the National Meteorological Agency versus the private sector, they feel there is a conflict of interest. But you touched upon more on the value chain, which is where the climate smart agriculture, seed inputs, there are a lot more service provider in the whole value chain they can look at. But I'm not sure whether there is any ideal model that is available from the cruise evaluation. If there are any publication, your colleagues can share that in the chat box, which will be of useful to our audience as well. While you have got limited time, I would request the participants to share in the chat box any specific questions so that John could provide any reflections to that. But however, I can take one or two questions before I pass it on to moderator. you can raise your hand for John specifically if there is any questions at this stage, or you will need to unmute and ask the question. Or if you are a bit shy, use your chat message
They
and you can also
raise
ask the
their hand,
question.
I can give them the opportunity to speak.
Yeah. Okay, raise your hand. Otherwise, ask your questions in the chat box. Okay, I don't see anything. Or is any of the panelists have any questions for John? Okay. At this point, no. I hope you will watch the chat box. Something would come. And you will be also watching our panel experts' interventions to come. So let me now introduce our moderator, Dr. Alok Sika. He is country representative for India and Bangladesh at the International Water Management Institute. Before joining IWMI, he was also served as a Deputy Director for Natural Resource Management at the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. I would not introduce many portfolio he has or his hat. Let me now call upon Dr. Alok to introduce the panel experts, and then over to you now.
Thank you, Giriraj, and thank you, John, for really setting the scene and the context, and which very eloquently you kind of gave a nice presentation, I think, which has really set the stage going. So before I move on to the panelists, let me first try and introduce them very briefly. I know that Giriraj has shared bigger kind of bios, but so because looking at the essence of the time, I think we have hardly 35 minutes. So we have the four panelists, and one is Dr. Mihir Bhatt, and Mihir has worked extensively on this extreme heat since contributing to IPCC report. He was involved and is currently supporting the integration of extreme heat into state level agriculture risk plans, which is really important and strengthening the civil society capabilities. And he is currently the director of All India Disaster Mitigation Institute. And we are happy to have you here with us, Mihir. And next is Ritu Bharadwaj, who is Director Climate Resilience, Finance and Loss and Damage at IIED, and that is where she is working. And Ritu is a climate finance and resilience specialist with over 20 years of vast and rich experience, and her work spans across climate finance, loss and damage, anticipatory action, and policy advocacy, and also engaging in influencing the UNFCCC negotiations and many financing for development and G20 agenda. So as we know that finance is the most important thing. So I think without money, you just can't move anywhere. Huh? So that's really an important person for us in the panel. Not that others are not, everybody is equally important. So, and the next panelist we have is Professor Dr. Albert Waits, who is a data model integration expert and the senior hydrologist with Deltaris. And he is a leading expert in data model integration and hydrological forecasting. I would say that if they all can kind of put on their, so that everybody can see them. And so he's been working on improving the predictability of weather and the climate-driven hydrological systems to support informed water and crisis management. And the last but the very important panelist which we have is Charlotte, and who is a VP, Public Affairs and Communications with Intersect. And she has held progressive leadership positions with North American technology and security industry leaders in Canada. And she has led the corporate marketing projects in a context of growth through acquisition and an IPO. And so I think we have a kind of a rich blend of all the kind of very diversified panel, and which is pretty much required for this kind of a topic which we are really discussing today. And so without further ado, what I would do is that we'll have a 2 rounds of quick questions. So because, as I said, the time is short, and I'll go for a first round and then I'll come back with the second round. And I'll request all the panelists if you can stick to about 3 minutes response, 3 to 4 minutes. If you take more time in the first round, maybe then we'll get a less time in the second round. So anyway, so with this, let me start with Mihir. I don't see Mihir is there or not. Here on the Mihir, you are there?
Yes, I'm very much there. I'm waving
Oh,
at you,
hi,
sir.
Mihir. Hi, how are you? Nice
Namaste.
to see
How
you
are
after a
you?
long time.
It is
So,
long time. Good to meet. Thank you.
yeah. So, Mihir, coming back to you, is that from AIDMI's extensive experience of working with the community across India, can you share few examples of how local business, NGOs, or social entrepreneurs have been engaged in co-delivering or financing early warning services at the grassroots level? Because I know that you are working at the grassroots level, so that's what we would like to know from you.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I'll be very quick in 3 minutes and I'll make 3 points. And I'll make those 3 points from the point of view of the users of early warning system. So that's something I think is important. And perhaps that's a perspective I'll try to bring to. The first point I'd like to make is that across 11 Indian cities, AIDMI has demonstrated that early warnings are most effective when owned and operated by local actors. So localization of early warning is extremely important. We have worked with street vendors, with micro enterprise, small businesses, transportation workers, etc., to translate the Indian Meteorological Department's and NDMA's early warning alerts into practical, that is doable, anticipatory, and the measures around extreme heat, cooling measures, floods, and cyclones. So that's the body of experience from where I'm drawing. The local NGOs and small entrepreneurs co-finance these systems by pooling small contributions that sustain communication channels, that display boards and micro insurance coverage where it is possible, and social protection work where also it is possible. And we've done that with a variety of organizations, including, I am very proud to say, with IIED. Rituji is here and she will talk more about it perhaps. For instance, in Ahmedabad's heat action pilot, shop owners helped fund shade installations and SMS-based advisories in partnership with the municipal corporation and telecom providers. So all this is possible because of IMD's what is called Mission Mosam, that is 2047 plan, which is very much targeted to people who are affected than the information itself. And the third point, the last point I'd like to make, is that such initiatives form community anchored PPPs. Government agencies provide the forecast, private telecoms and insurers provide technology and financial tools, and citizens group and the affected population themselves ensure last mile credibility and connectivity. So I'd like to end by saying that this co-delivery model has shown that, and please underline, that early warning saves lives, but anticipatory action saves future, turning risk information into collective investment for resilience. That's our experience. There is a tremendous demand across urban India, and there is a tremendous demand, I have not talked about it, across rural India. We'll talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mihir. I think you really made a very, very important point, because those who are working with the local community, because I have been having pretty much experience. So I really do agree with all the useful points which you have mentioned. Thank you very much. So I'll come back to you, as I said. So next, I move on to Ritu. And Ritu, IID has been leading their efforts on climate finance, loss and damage. And, when we are talking about these things, the PPP becomes very important. So how can PPP models for early warning systems be structured to ensure transparency, community engagement, and equitable access, and particularly when we are looking into the climate vulnerable countries and the communities. Over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Alokji, and it's real pleasure to be part of this panel, and especially coming after Mihir Bhai, because he's really set the stage quite well. Um, at IID, we've been working with almost 11 countries now for strengthening anticipatory and shock responsive social protection. So that's one area where we're really looking not just early warning system, because early warning system is of no use unless it is implemented towards a decision making. So what is it used for? That makes the difference. And Mihir Bhai has given a very good example there. What we have learned from our own experience is early warning system can only translate into resilience when we are able to connect people, finance, and technology.
Yeah.
And I'll just share a couple of learnings from that. One is, you rightly said that finance becomes a very, very important point. But we typically see that, what's the finance available on the table? Right now, we are seeing that the aid space is really shrinking,
Yeah.
and we are working within that limitation. So we definitely are looking towards private sector. We are looking towards the multilateral development banks and other insurance and other sources of finance, but they don't see this as of course there are some private suppliers of early warning system, but that's one part of ecosystem. And as John also mentioned, we need to look at the entire value chain, and the entire value chain, we need private sector and MDB investment at every layer of that value chain. And they can only come if they look at this investment as a value proposition, as something which delivers economic value, which has a better economic return from them. And that is where we need to demonstrate the value. And there are ample examples, so many evidence. We have recently come up with a paper ourselves where we have shown that there's evidence that investing early in an anticipatory manner, what Mihir Bhai was also saying, delivers far greater return than acting later. And just on the basis of 8-country data, and again across 24 social protection program, what we found that if the current weather, the disaster pattern continues, these 8 countries would suffer somewhere around $21 billion of losses. And if the same losses were to be addressed in an anticipatory manner through early warning and early action, the same losses can be covered with an investment of 4 billion. So clearly there is an economic sense. But how do we really demonstrate that? And to do that, we have done something. We've developed a toolkit called Aspire, so Anticipatory Social Protection Index for Resilience, but I'm not going to take you through that. But the basic purpose of that is that with that shrinking aid space and where the money is really limited, we need to know exactly where to draw private sector investment and where to tell them that doing investment in this area will give you this return. And and how we are trying to do this across 8 countries is to do a diagnostic at the country level, but not try to create a parallel system. Look at the existing government systems, because we need to, because right now, governments probably have the biggest delivery channel. They have the biggest funding in this space. What we need to identify is where the gaps are. Why is it not working well? And if you are able to identify those gaps and show the value proposition of investing in those areas, then probably we have a much better chance of drawing in private sector investment, drawing in multilateral development banks and funding and so on. I have a couple of other points, but probably I'll come back in the second round.
All right, thank you. Yes, I do agree with you. Without value proposition, I don't think that anybody's in the private sector is going to really make any investments. So, and that's definitely pretty much there. And value proposition could be in many, many forms. Yes. So, moving on to the next panelist, Albert. I know that with Delta Risk, you are involved in a lot of hydrologic modeling. And so Delta Risk brings strong technical expertise in hydrological modeling. So can you highlight a project where Delta Risk worked with public and private partners to co-design or scale early warning systems for floods or droughts or any other water-related risks? So over to you, Albert.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I can elaborate on that. At Deltares, we develop, for instance, the Delfuse software platform that can be used by ourselves, but can also be used by intermediaries like private companies to basically build early warning systems together with governmental agencies or even with private firms or for direct service delivery. That is also being conducted at the moment. Good examples. Yeah, there are many good examples. I will share a link in the chat later on. But for instance, we do have a project running at the moment in Africa for Accra in Ghana, where we work together with a consultant and local firms, firms from Accra, where we basically try to develop the early warning system together with the stakeholders, and then at the same time train the people from the government, but also these local firms in maintaining and developing the system further. And that specific system is focused on flooding in that city, and also translate flooding to impacts, etc., and actionable information. Other examples I can think of is in the Dar es Salaam, where we have set up a forecasting system together with the local people, involving local and also train the people there. Another example is maybe the system in Vietnam, where we worked with JVA. And a running example in India is a project that is ongoing, I think, in India, in Assam region, where we are working together with Royal Haskoning DHV to develop also early warning systems in that region. So I think there are many examples, not only from ourselves, but I think from the ecosystem around the software that we developed, the Delfuse system. There are many examples, not only from ourselves, but also from other partners that work either with private firms, consultancy firms, local consultancy firms. But it's always a matter of educating, training these local private firms in helping maintaining the developed early warning system. And that's also, at least that's the goal at Deltares, that we transition this knowledge to, as much as possible, the local private firms or local governmental organizations, so they can basically maintain the system themselves and develop it further.
All right. So thank you very much. And so that brings me to the last panelist, Charlotte, and that you have been working with Intersect. Hello.
Hi, yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. No. So, Intersect delivers geolocation powered alert systems, and which is really very, very important for early warning systems and making it more actionable. So how is your company working with public agencies or with the telecom providers to strengthen last mile coverage for the early warning capabilities through scalable and the real-time alert solutions?
Thank you. I will share my screen.
Mhm.
I have a few slides.
Okay.
Okay, you should be able to see it now, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll get to your question. Maybe just a quick introduction on Intersect, who we are. So we are a relatively small company, actually. We're in France, headquarters in Paris, and we have like about 150 employees worldwide, but we have projects and operations in about 50 countries. So we support public authorities and mobile network operators, as you said, in public alerting systems and other safety and security use cases as well. Since 2022, we have deployed public warning systems in France, in Germany, Croatia, Luxembourg, Austria, Slovenia. Those are some references in Europe, but we also operate in countries outside Europe, Our systems are, as you can see here, multi-channel, meaning that, yes, we do leverage cell broadcast and location-based SMS when we work with telecom operators, but we also integrate traditional and digital channels, mobile apps, emails, sirens, TV, radio, it can actually integrate with pretty much any channel. We are used to doing alert messages in multi-languages as well. And of course, we follow the CAP protocol, Common Alerting Protocol. You mentioned floods earlier in some of the case studies, especially you, I think, Albert. I'd just like here also to take an example and a minute to present a recently deployed project in England, where about 5.5 million homes and businesses are at risk of flooding. This system, I think, is a good example of public-private partnership because it's a result of a collaboration between various entities. Environment Agency here, they've been providing geospatial data, specialized flood maps, etc. There's been some partners as well for forecasting, such as the Met Office and the Flood Forecasting Center in England. On our end at Intersec, what we provided was the system for templated zones, as you can see an example here, messages and warning dissemination, of course, SMS. So here it's not related to telecom operators. I'm just saying that clear because we don't only do cell broadcast and location-based SMS. It really depends on the country, the context, what's available. And here, for floods in England, that's mostly registered users on all these different channels that are listed here. Plus, there were two other private companies that were responsible for the project, so the project management and the public website. So really big collaboration. The service has around 2.6 million registered in England, and they send approximately 3,000 alerts per year. This is an example of the system. Actually, we just went live end of October, so that's you're seeing the new system now. And before that, there were like 20 years of legacy fragmented system from different sources, and it was actually a nightmare for the users. And now, because it's cloud ready and it's a lot more modern and unified, we have also the possibility to scale the project, to scale the system itself, meaning that if we want at some point to add new users or implement new AI features, for example, the fact that it's cloud-based is definitely a plus. But I've been showing many European examples, and I'd like to address, some barriers, obstacles that we face in the global south, as well as some opportunities, because we are currently engaging a lot with many countries, mostly in Asia Pacific, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, that are also looking to implement this kind of technology. First barrier is that there is no mandate in most countries, meaning that although governments recognize the need for an EWS, it's usually the lowest priority in terms of budget also. In the European Union, it was actually a good example because this Article 110 led to the rapid deployment of robust systems across Europe. Second barrier, funding. So it definitely remains a challenge because countries still hope that this project will be funded by donors rather than state funds. And even when the grants of the projects are approved, the process takes years. And priority, during these years tend to change, new elections, how it is. So it's very challenging for them to go through the project. Some governments also complain that funds are largely allocated to audits and studies, and there is just little, left for the project implementation. So that's the private sector speech in a way, We truly believe in mutualization for that because multi-country projects, they are, and we are seeing that a very effective way of driving forward projects forward. as well as I mentioned, a cloud-based environment, which is one single environment but has dedicated workspaces. That would be a very good example for the seeds countries, for example, to mutualize investments.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And now we move on to the next round.
Oh, I
And
had two. I was almost done. I don't, but I don't have more than that after. It's, can I finish?
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So third barrier that we're hearing from our government clients as well is that it's very complicated. And you mentioned that, Ritu, earlier. We tend to follow a step-by-step process instead of having like a holistic view of the projects. And we see that they're mostly working in silos. So in the end, it leads to fragmented solutions. You can see they have like multiple screens, and for the end users, forecasting, like all the pillars, end up on being each a different solution, which gets very complicated. There are also lots of wrong assumptions, and I really want to mention that on technology itself. We hear often that they have to choose between cell broadcast and location-based SMS because doing both is more expensive. It's not necessarily the case, but combining both brings a lot of benefits in terms of crisis management. And last barrier is that, of course, the telecom operators, when they should be involved, they are not incentivized. It's not commercially interesting for them, of course, to invest in an early warning system. So we need to have like incentives in terms of obligations, mandates, and in terms of growth opportunities and avenues as well. The good news.
So please, because now I think we already run out of time. So,
Thank you.
So just please conclude.
Oh, I was just going to say that the good news is that behind the technology itself, there are actually some very interesting potential for the telecom operators. And this is a message that we need to work more with the telecom regulatory bodies themselves to help convince telecom operators in joining the efforts.
All right, thank you. And now we move on to the next round and the final round, where we are going to be more with a focus on scaling strategies, financing models, and the future partnerships. So I'll again come back to Mihir Bhai. Mihir, what role do you see for local government, private sector partnership in sustaining last mile early warning systems, especially in areas with limited donor support? I know a little bit you touched upon that. Maybe you can elaborate it more on this round.
Sure. One sort of overwhelming fact is that there is a tremendous appetite across rural and urban India, but also South Asia, for what we are discussing. So there is a demand, but it's a latent demand and it needs to be articulated. But those who can, really, there is a large demand for that. So that's one sort of fact I just wanted to put up front. The local governments are natural and actually the key custodians of early warning systems, but they rarely have predictable budgets for maintenance or communication.
Yes.
They have forwarded, the way forward is to build city and district level partnerships. Most early warning partnerships are at national level and they are needed and they've sort of served their purpose. The time has come to actually move to city and district level partnerships where municipal bodies, for example, contract local enterprise to maintain alert infrastructure, for example, manage data dashboards, for example, and operate call center style climate information kiosk. So that's something first push once we articulate the demand. The second push is in AIDMI's experience shows that blended finance, what Rituji very clearly pointed out across countries, also works across cities and districts. So small municipal allocations, small district allocations matched with private sector co-investment and community contributions creates durability beyond donor cycle. So telecom firms, for example, can integrate disaster alerts into existing commercial networks, Insurance providers, for example, can underwrite seasonal risk in exchange for shared data, and local universities, institutions, think tanks such as your institution, IIT, for example, can serve with their local partners such as us as monitoring partners. So in the end, I'd like to conclude that as emphasized during Indian Meteorological's 150-year dialogue, we must, and I want to quote, embed early warning systems in the daily decisions of citizens of India, particularly those who are pushing our economy towards better and higher growth. Local PPPs make that possible, keeping systems operational, trusted, and inclusive even when external funding ends. So, resilient early warning ecosystems emerge not from large budgets per se, though we need large budgets, but it emerges from long term relationships with the local city authorities and local district authorities and the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well said. And I do agree with you on all those things. And of course, blended finance and the local city level partnership, etc. And I know that time is limitation. Otherwise, we could have learned more from your experience. So next, I move on to Ritu. And I think moving on from where Amir left, that how can we ensure that the private sector investments in early warning align with the global climate justice goals and they deliver measurable resilience dividends to particularly the underserved population?
Thank you, Alokji. See, when we talk about climate justice, this is about providing or creating resilience or compensating people who have not contributed to the problem that we are facing right now. So
Yeah.
it's probably the small island developing states, it's the least developed country. And even if you talk about our own South Asian region, if you look at the coastal areas, there are so many other areas where there are poor and marginalized communities who have done nothing to contribute to global warming, yet they are, really facing the brunt of increasing disasters. So how do
That's
we?
the irony.
That's the irony. But the other irony is that the private sector investment does not go to these areas. Now, here we are not talking, you can't create the kind of impact that we really want, early warning for all. That kind of the kind of investment needed for that cannot come from impact investment, cannot come from a little bit of contribution from some philanthropy somewhere. For this, we really need large scale investment. And that investment can only come, I'll go back to my earlier point about value proposition, like what's the economic case? And that is something that we are trying to, there's a paper, I'll share the results from that anyways. There's a paper which we are going to publish next week, where we really need. So what does early warning do? And if we use early warning and take anticipatory action, it avoids losses. And if you are able to quantify that avoided losses, that creates the value proposition for investment. And in our case, the paper that we're going to publish next week, we have basically done a modeling of what losses can be avoided. So, if you just look at the power sector, now from the power sector itself, we have shown that the losses can be brought down from 48 million to 9.8 million. And if we and this is not just the modeling. If I give you a real world example, when in Germany, when 2021 floods happened, it was big media coverage. Everyone covered, so many people. But if we take the case of Audi, which is the car manufacturer, they had done some proactive measures, and even though there was flooding around, their plant continued operation, not a single day of break. Whereas if you compare that with the Chennai flood of 2015, all the major car manufacturers, one of the biggest auto manufacturing center, because we didn't have those measures built around, massive losses, 225 million is what was estimated. But the moment you start estimating that, now if you say somebody tells them that by investing 15 million you could have avoided 225 million of losses, then the investment makes sense. So why I'm giving this example is that the moment you monetize the losses, and that's what we need to do, we need to bring in the expertise of, for example, insurance sector has a massive expertise in this space where they exactly tell you that if you take these measures, this is the losses that you can avoid. But if you don't take these measures, your premium will go up, probably your losses would increase. So we really need to use some of those risk analytics, quantify the value, and then bring in private sector investment. And then I'll just make one last point and I'll stop. Is, there's a real value in what Mihir Bhai said about localization. Now, all these models are fine, but taking that to the local level, you really need to bridge that people's plus tech approach. And this is something that we did with Government of India's Ministry of Rural Development, where we used the drought early warning system to see how we could better manage the planning of the Public Works-Based Social Protection Program, MGNREGS. And that has really worked because it is the community which is using that data early warning and then making the plans. But of course, we also need to take it one step beyond and bring in insurance protection and so on. But yeah, we should at least start at some point and materializing some of these risk analytics into actual action on the ground.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You're really on the dot. So I must say that you hit the nail and and on the, and unless we really monetize the avoided losses, so that itself can be pretty much translated into that how best we can really protect those things. So thank you very much for that. And moving on to Albert, you know that Delta is working, and do you think that Delta S can work as a technical intermediaries? Because sometimes for doing all these things, some technical intermediaries are required to kind of translate those kind of alerts into the losses and the damages, and helping translate climate risk data into actionable, cost-effective services for government and business alike. So what is your take on that, Albert?
I think, yes, Deltaris is a not-for-profit organization. So it's not in that sense, it's a private institution, but it's not for profit. One of the goals we have is to develop knowledge that can be shared. And I read in the chat about mutualization. The Delfuse software that we develop is basically also a little bit in that direction, that we developed this software product. It's basically available without any license fee, and we try to we develop the software based on questions we get from projects. That can be market projects, that can be World Bank projects, ADB, whatever. So we develop that software with those projects, and then the software that is being developed is immediately available for the whole community that is using that software. And in that sense, in that way, we were able to grow maintain the software product, renew it occasionally, develop it further, and grow the ecosystem around it with a lot of private firms around it that either implement it themselves or use it for local flood forecasting or drought forecasting warnings using, for instance, the radar nowcasting, whatever. So there are a lot of different applications and possibilities, but we try to basically be in the center to maintain that software and make it available. And of course, that needs the advantage by doing it like this, that we create a large community that talk to each other, and they can also basically share cost in developments if they have they want to develop in a certain direction, certain functionality. We try to basically bring those players together so they can share costs for those developments. And once these developments have been done, they are available for the rest of the community. So that is how we see our role in this early warning system development. Apart from that, we do the same with the modeling tooling that we develop and make that available as well.
All right. Thank you very much. And now again, move on to Charlotte. I think you have already given an elaborate presentation, Charlotte, but just any last 1 minute response from you, particularly what policy levers could help unlock greater private sector investment?
Yeah. Again, what you said, Ritu, I think I very much relate about the value proposition. We need to explain that it's beneficial for the government, for the private sector itself, but in us working with telecom operators, this is also what I meant to explain at the end, is to explain to them that it's not just an obligation, that it's a public good, and that if they do that, they can also benefit, to better coordinate their efforts with Homeland Security, for example, law enforcement agencies, investigations. But there are plenty of other use cases that the telecom operators can build upon to do bigger public good and not limited to early warning system, which is, as we said, not big enough of an incentive for them.
All right. Thank you very much. And I must thank all the panelists for really being so insightful and experiencing really the very good lessons which are coming from the ground up and which are really pretty much required. Now, I don't see that we have time left for questions and answers. I see on the chat mostly the panelists among themselves have been asking and responding. So that's a good thing. And maybe what I would suggest that those who are there in the audience, all the participants, that they can write their questions, send it to Giriraj or the organizers, and they'll get back to you if there are any questions in consultation with the panelist. And so I think Giriraj, that's okay with you because I think we have already run out of time.
We still have 2 minutes. Maybe
Yeah,
we
so
can ask anybody who want to raise
yeah,
their
in 2 minutes,
hand
if
and ask
anybody
questions.
can say anything about the question. I know the 2 minutes is rather less, but anyway. So anyone in the audience would like to have any burning question?
I hope everything is clear to all the participants who have joined.
So if none, and then I think let me say, because I'll not take 2 minutes also to conclude, let me also just say that really it was a very useful panel discussion, and where we covered right from one of the important thing which really stuck to me is the localization, because I'm also the person who work with more of a localization. So unless you localize the things in a local context, things are not going to work. And the next thing is the value proposition, because unless anybody sees a value proposition in anything, things are not going to really move forward, because those are the very, very practical things. And one point which Ritu you mentioned is how best we can monetize the awarded losses. And that much, if somebody can really chip in to benefit the local people, perhaps those are the kind of the things that there, because without early warning, and I know that early warning has no value unless and until it is translated into actionable advice, actionable points, then only we are really going to be, because this is something in my previous roles, whether in planning commission or in the agriculture ministry, I used to always say that giving rainfall data is no big deal. How you're going to convert it into actionable points. So I think this is what you all have touched. So thank you all very much from my side. Over to you, Giriraj, for your last word.
All good. We can close the session. Thank you to
Okay.
all the panelists and presenters, as well as the audience for staying with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye.
You, bye bye.